Hello, Alabama fans, and welcome back to the BamaOnLine Big Show. It's been a couple of weeks here. A lot has happened in that time frame. With me is Charlie Potter, team writer extraordinaire, and I'm Tim Watts, the BamaOnline.com publisher. Later in the show, we'll be bringing on Blake Byler, young guy who does a lot of good stuff for us. Jimmy Stein, and of course, Andrew Bone will be here with me to talk recruiting. We're going to talk roster. We're going to talk basketball. Talk that damn portal windows closed. We're going to talk about that as long as we can. But Charlie Potter, that thing seems like, why does it seem so long, the portal window?
It's because it just feels like it never closes. You have the 20-day window. Then Alabama's bowl game was after the deadline on the 28th, so they get a 5-day extension. And then with the 5-day extension, you get that 48 extra hours after. It just seems like can we not just have a distinct cutoff date? It just
Well,
seems
not
like
only
there's
that,
always.
so it ended the 28th, and then Bama played the 31st, and then you got 5 days. So you tacked on another 8 or 9, and when I found that out, I was pretty disheartened.
Yeah, and you look at it too, like Alabama had, I think, 14 guys go in the portal during that initial 20-day window, and then they've
Mhm.
had another 10 since the bowl game. So it's kind of come in waves, not quite like we experienced in early 2024, that's for sure. But it feels like it's been longer than that 20-day window that they advertised to begin with.
It's just a long time to have people tampering with your team, people negotiating their NIL. It's just extremely long window for that with kids playing, people trying to get into school. Alabama had a portal commitment last night, in fact. So really, there's just no stopping at any point in this calendar right now, is there?
No. Yeah, and I mean, like I know you guys have posted about it from a recruiting standpoint. Now the coaches are going out and seeing kids in the 2026 class. So if you think you get a breather from a coaching staff standpoint, that isn't the case. It feels like it is 365, 24/7, no doubt. But yeah, from a roster, you're always recruiting, but it feels like these days you're always recruiting your roster, whether that's maybe look elsewhere, bring guys back, bring guys in. It feels like it is nonstop. You're right.
Yeah, and I think some people, like even Alabama fans, I still don't think the fact that there was a coaching change has really set in for some Alabama fans. Like, you get a lot of, well, Saban did this in the portal. Well, Saban wasn't coming in fresh off a coaching change. He was the coach that changed. Still guys figuring out this is the place for them. And hey, that's a two-way street. Is that a guy they want in the program? So there's been a lot of discussions. You get through a season, up and down season. But honestly, I think the biggest news we've got so far is Jalen Milroe going pro.
Yeah, I think that's some news that people probably would have liked to have had after the bowl game. He didn't wait too long though. Afterwards, he and Tyler Booker and Jahad Campbell all announced a couple days after. That was all expected. But yeah, I mean, that's from a 2025 roster standpoint, that is probably the most significant news because now you're looking for a new starting quarterback. And you have 3 on the roster right now with Keelan Russell finally getting on campus. He's going to compete with Ty Simpson and Austin Mack. And that's 3. I know a lot of people probably want 4. I know Nick Saban throughout his entire tenure was steadfast on like to have 4 scholarship quarterbacks. And Nick Sheridan said the same thing. I asked him before Alabama left for Tampa for the bowl game, like what's the ideal number? And he did say 4. You'd like to have 1 in every class. And I think that's probably standard across all college football. But they also you made it clear that it also depends on the situation. There's years they've had 3, there's years they've had 5. So quarterback is going to be we're going to be talking about quarterback feels like every week until the season kicks off and probably into the season, but that's the case every year when you have a new starter. But yeah, I mean, going back to what you were talking about a minute ago, though, it is a different offseason because it felt like Kalen DeBoer and that staff, it was full retention mode after Nick Saban retired. So it is a little different. You can kind of start to reshape your roster a little bit. And I think that's why when people start to have red flags and throw their hands up, like what the hell's going on with the roster right now with so many people leaving, you got to think about, well, now you're not in retention mode anymore. You can kind of shape the roster the way you want to a little bit. And when you do that, you're going to have some guys leave. And, for lack of a better phrase, you're going to trim some fat from the bottom of it.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing. I mean, because you had a whole year now basically to get to know your team, who fits, who doesn't. We've seen some inside linebackers
Mm-hmm.
leave, but if you have, I mean, the huge news: Justin Jefferson's going to come back. Deontay Lawson's coming back. That wasn't expected. So you've got two unexpected curveballs for a lot of guys. And then the new staff signed three inside linebackers with Duke Johnson, Luke Metz, and Abdul Sanders. So you're sandwiched between 3 and 3. And you also get Hill Green from Colorado. So you can kind of see the guys in the middle are like, hey, let's see what we can do. I certainly understand Jeremiah Alexander, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that was something that Kane Womack talked about in Tampa. I think I was the one that asked about Justin Jefferson, just if they had made a decision on that. And he talked about how you're right. You expected to lose all three of your inside backers because Jihad Campbell, Deontay Lawson could have turned pro, Justin Jefferson running out of eligibility. So it's a situation where you get now 2/3 of that leader, the top of that position group back, which is good news. But I think why people are probably a little disheartened is because Deontay Lawson and Justin Jefferson can only come back for 1 year. I think Hill Green also has 1 year of eligibility left as well. So it is great for 2025. It's huge news. But beyond that, losing depth at that position isn't necessarily ideal. I think we expected Jeremiah Alexander and Sterling Dixon to maybe look elsewhere when the news dropped of Lawson and Jefferson coming back. But to lose a guy like Justin Okoronkwo, that kind of sucks a little bit because I think he had a bright future. But with a lot of these things, when you see your position group, the pecking order start to get muddied up a little bit with guys coming back, guys coming in, maybe you can go get NIL elsewhere. I don't really blame these guys necessarily. It's just when you're looking ahead and trying to put together a roster for the future, it's kind of a tough blow.
Yeah, well, another thing that factors in when you do all this is when you look at the depth. I know ideally you want to stack the depth, but really to me, 2025 is the only thing I'm worried about because there's no guarantee Justin or Jeremiah or Sterling would have been there after 2025. There is no locked in thing. Also, there's no, you could have these three young guys step up, take those positions, or you can go to the portal, so you can go to that. These Jefferson came from junior college and Hill Green obviously came from Colorado. Has anybody surprised you that went in the portal?
Okoronkwo maybe a little bit just because you saw two guys already leave. And then I know it's because of the decisions that were made by his older teammates that impacted it a lot. You never really want to see starters go in the portal. So Devontae Smith and Elijah Pritchett. But I think with Pritchett, it's a situation of he didn't play great this year. I mean, I know Pro Football Focus numbers, but I think he allowed like 31 pressures. That includes 6 sacks. So not a great year. Maybe he wants to see a change of scenery from a school and a position standpoint, flipping to the other side of the line. It's just there's a lot of things that go into it. And Alabama's kind of thin at tackle, but I think they have the tackles that they want on the roster. And then with Devontae Smith, I mean, he's a guy that when Nick Saban retired, kind of like Malachi Moore, he was very vocal. He was on social media. He was kind of leading that if they ain't wearing crimson charge. But moving a little closer to home, probably getting a decent bump in NIL pay. I don't really blame him. But when you just look at maybe surprises or the ones that impact the roster for next season the most, when you lose guys that are kind of sitting on top of that depth chart, that's kind of where your attention goes.
Yeah, Pritchard's going to get paid. I think that's the one thing that people have to realize. I mean, people were messing with Wilcom Formby as well. There's not enough tackles in the world. There's not. I mean, you've got, Nebraska's heavily involved. I mean, that was the first name we heard. Texas Tech was another one. I don't feel he wanted just to move to Nebraska, as that change of scenery. A guy from Georgia that nothing against Nebraska. I'm just saying it's a completely different.
You're not wrong, though.
I'm just saying it's a completely different version of the world. If I want to change the scenery, I just go to Huntsville. You know what I mean? I don't go to South Dakota. Of course, I would see Nate Oats' basketball team 3 times a year, but that's beside the point. So I think you look at that. You got tackles that are going to get paid. He's one of them. He had some promise. He looks like $1 billion physically. He has a lot to do and a lot to grow as a player. I agree with you on Smitty. That'd be the two I chose. I understand Smitty. He did get a healthy NIL. The thing I was told about Notre Dame is they have a lot of trouble getting portal guys in academically, but they can get grad transfers in a lot easier. That kind of upped Smitty's value. He got closer to home. We understand he's got a baby now. So it made sense, and that's just Bama had a choice decision. He had an offer. I think overall, I know the numbers look crazy when you count 23 out and 7 in. This is what we kind of expected, right? To get to that 85 number. They're at 80 now.
Mhm.
But I mean, this is kind of what we expected, right?
A little bit, yeah, and it gives you some flexibility for you still have the rest of you can add whenever. There's no windows for you to add players to your roster, but you also have the spring window as well. You have the playoff teams that are still out there. You still have 4 teams that are going to be impacted by the transfer portal because Texas and Ohio State and Penn State and Notre Dame, they're all going to have an extra 5 days once their season ends. So I'm not saying they're necessarily going to add anybody from those rosters, but there's the potential for that. And then you're going to have another 10-day window in the spring. And, we'll see what happens there. Alabama can also lose players during that as well. And that'll be interesting. I think that when you look at positions like tackle or maybe D tackle or another spot where they're just kind of maybe thin. That's where I think the spring would make sense. You see what you've got, and then you reassess and see what you want to add then. So to have 5 open spots, I think you're in a good spot. But it gives you some flexibility for later on down the road if you see glaring needs on your roster once you're able to hit the practice field.
I found it interesting the reaction to the portal. I mean, the Louisiana running back they took has been talked about
Yeah.
so many times on the BOL roundtable. I can't find the harm in it. I mean, you got 4 guys on the roster with inexperience at the running back position. I feel like all of them were banged up at one point. You lose Justice Hayes, you bring in another guy that's played 3 years. Um, and again, a depth piece that's going to try to, find his role on the team.
Yeah, and you got to think too, like for me, positions like tight end, defensive back, linebacker, that's where we see the most young guys play on special teams. You got to have bodies at those spots. So we've seen running backs plenty play on special teams. I think Jam Miller, as a true freshman, played in every game,
Yeah,
but
he
he
did.
primarily played on special teams. Like
He did.
you've got to think about those roles too. And I don't think I think for the most part, a lot of people they're still in that Nick Saban headspace. And when he speaks, everyone listens, and rightfully so. But he always talked about using it kind of as free agency. You supplement your roster. You're going out and getting pieces that you think can come in and contribute right away. So then that's in their head, and they see an offensive tackle who hasn't played much college football from Ball State, or a running back with some production but not eye-popping numbers from Louisiana come in, and they're thinking, well, what the hell is going on? But in this now in Kalen DeBoer's time, and he's flipping this roster, you need some of those depth pieces. You need some guys that can come in and not necessarily what these guys are going to be, but you need some practice bodies. You need some just bodies in certain areas. And running back, I think, at 5, they had 5 this past season, so it's an okay number. But if you're losing, a Ty Lockwood, so you're going to be a tight end short, you're a little thin at linebacker now, or defensive back. You need guys to play special teams. So that's a guy or a role that Washington could come in and play right away, and while also giving you experience to that running back position. So there's a lot of different ways you could look at it, but anytime you can add experience and depth at a position and you don't immediately see guys enter the transfer portal as a result of it, I think it can only be a positive thing.
Yeah, and the defensive line's a classic. I mean, we saw on the roundtable for weeks, you need defensive linemen, you need defensive linemen. They're so short. And then Overton came back and Tim Keenan went back and they said the room's great. Well, I think the coaches knew that, right? I think the coaches knew something in that situation that fans probably didn't. I don't know why. Tim did kind of lead us a little bit on social media. LT never said a word, though. Speaking of depth pieces, let's bring in
Nice.
our Louisiana
Good.
running back. Let's bring in our Louisiana. Blake Byler, our basketball guy, and our football guys come flying in. Freshly shaved?
He did.
Recently.
It's
I
jarring.
did it too. I did it too. You did yours this morning, though, it looks like.
No, I did it yesterday, but I really did it like a week ago.
Mhm.
Okay, that's good. You just touched it up.
He said
Blake,
this-
welcome to the show. Glad to have you. You survived your first portal with us. Did you think you were going to make it?
I made it somehow. I mean, it's all over the place. Everything's happening all the time. Couple surprises, but we made it through. It was less hectic than last year, that's for sure. When you look on the positive side, they didn't lose 40 dudes to the portal this year, so we made it through.
Yeah, the one thing that, like I thought the portal ended the 28th. I actually had that confirmed that it was supposed to end the 28th. So that was just 19 days. And I even told Charlie, like, it's only 19 days compared to 30 last year when Kalen left. And then I looked up, it was still 28 days because it was 5 days after the bowl game. So
It's the fact that that you include non-playoff teams is a ridiculous thing, in my opinion.
Alabama had a
Yeah,
longer
that's
portal window than Tennessee.
Which is insane.
I
yeah,
mean,
that's
it's just,
ridiculous.
yeah, it's ridiculous. Blake, anyways, we're going to look at the roster overall. I want to get you and Charlie's thoughts, just not breaking down positions, but overall your thoughts on the roster, sitting at 80, heading into spring, got a few spots, probably some walk-ons. Charlie, I want you to update us on this first. Nick Saban used to come in light and then give scholarships to walk-ons, right?
Here and there, you didn't necessarily have the warm and fuzzy videos where they tell the guys in front of the team. So that wasn't.
Yeah.
I think the last time I remember that it was like Jamie Mosley that got one. So that tells you how long ago it was. Well, I mean, we saw with Kalen DeBoer this past year. They didn't put out a video or anything, but he gave Nealon Hibbett a scholarship. So
Nice.
you do have some specialists that are going to be walk-ons. You have some pieces that you've added via the portal that are preferred walk-ons. That can happen as well. I think though they typically they wait for fall camp for that. Like it's
Okay.
not going to be before the spring, because again we talked about that roster flexibility. I don't think you want to handcuff yourself and then have like a pile up of injuries, knock on wood, at a certain position and need to go out and add some guys and be kind of stuck from a scholarship standpoint. So yeah, I think if they do that, you'll see it happen in fall camp.
Blake, overall, the roster, when you look at it for the football team, what are your thoughts? I mean, just, looking at, Kalen DeBoer, I mean, it'll still a few weeks away from being here a full year, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think the biggest thing has been all the returners, the senior returners that they're bringing back. Some of the best football teams that you see and some of the best football teams that Alabama has had in recent memory had a lot of returning seniors and guys who have been in the program for a long time and decided to come back. And then you look at these returners specifically on the defensive side. I mean, LT Overton, Tim Keenan, guys y'all have already mentioned, Devontae Jackson, Justin Jefferson, Deontay Lawson. Like, these are all big-time contributors, especially your number one corner in Devontae Jackson, your captain and top linebacker in Deontay Lawson. You've got your top defensive end and your top defensive tackle. Like, all of these guys choosing to come back. And then you even look on the offensive side of the ball, Jam Miller, your top running back, Parker Brailsford, your top center. We're still waiting on potential news from guys like Jeremy Bernard. Like that's a lot of really good experience. And I think that should give Alabama fans a lot of excitement and confidence going into 2025, because you have all of these guys who they're your best players that have bought into what Kalen DeBoer is doing. And they're like, I trust this guy. I want to run it back one more year and see what we can do with all this experience. And I mean, this is true in college football, college basketball. The best teams are the ones with the most experience and the guys that have played a lot of snaps and been there. We heard Kane Womack say probably 27 times throughout the year that experience is finite, and experience isn't going to be as finite on this 2025 team as it was in 2024 with all the guys they got coming back. So I think that's a really positive sign. It speaks volumes about this coaching staff and the trust that they have in them. And it's going to be a good team, especially on the defensive end. Like, I think the defense is in a really good spot with all the returners they brought back.
Charlie, I think people don't really, not everybody, more than I would expect, they don't understand what all you use the NIL for, right? It's not just to get players, right? It's not just to get high school recruits and portal recruits. A lot of it is keeping, because, I was telling a buddy yesterday, he said I gave him a heart attack, but the options for some of those guys who are draft eligible is not just the NFL or Alabama. They could also have hit the portal.
Yeah, they could have. And you hear rumblings all the time of maybe offers from other school. I know we made a big deal about the Jalen Mbakwe, the 7-figure deal he was offered. That happens. That happens all the time. It is rampant in college football. But when you have guys that could go and make an NFL paycheck or could go and get paid probably a lot more at other schools to stick around, you're piggybacking off of what Blake said. It says a lot about the culture. It says a lot about what they think of this coaching staff and what they think of Kalen DeBoer. So, yeah, I mean, just huge recruiting wins from the standpoint of getting guys to come back. I don't want to compare it necessarily to another season, but, it wasn't quite the dominoes that we saw the GIF in that 2019 offseason, but you've got some key guys coming back and guys that are leaders and guys that are going to play a ton of football. Some guys are going to be on the field for every snap. They're going to be coming back, and to get that, that's huge.
That domino, though, had them thinking Tua was coming
Mhm.
back, Waddle was coming back. I mean, that was such a crazy situation that you got Najee and Smitty and who's the offensive lineman, and
Alex Leatherwood and Dylan
you got all these
Moses.
guys back, and there was still some disappointment because they wanted all those guys going in the top 10 and 15 of the
Well,
draft.
you say that. I did see threads on the message board like, what if Tyler Booker came back? And you're like, hold on a little bit. Like, let's pump the brakes just a second. I think everything else, though, I think people are pleasantly surprised, and there's still the potential for more good news. Like Blake was saying with Jeremy Bernard, he still has a decision to make.
Yeah, he'd be big. I mean, especially when you added a guy like Isaiah Horton to go with Ryan and all these other guys. Blake, two more things before we get into basketball. One, your thoughts on this football schedule next year. The first 4 games, when I was looking at it, it's a little wacky.
Yeah, it's an interesting schedule. It's extremely difficult because you have 10 Power 4 games, and that's probably more than the majority of college football is playing this year. I know Florida last year played 11, I'm pretty sure, so it's not the most we've seen, but it's going to be extremely challenging. You start with the road trip to Florida State, which is going to be really difficult because obviously, like, this Florida State team is going to be much improved from this year. I don't know everything they've done from a portal perspective, but it literally can't get worse. Like, they're not going to go worse than the 2-10 or whatever it was they went this year. And those fans are going to be hungry. I'm sure there's still a little sting from Alabama getting into the 2023 college football playoff over an undefeated Florida State. They'll still be fired up about that. So that's an interesting game. And then you've got is it ULM week 2? And then you got Wisconsin on the return trip.
Yes.
And so in 2 of the first 3 weeks, you've got 2 Power 4 non-conference opponents that are both going to be challenges. And then you get the bye week, and then it goes into Georgia and SEC play. And that's a road game against Georgia. Like, the schedule overall is extremely difficult. I think it sets up the way that it sets up is decent as far as when you play which games. I think that really tough stretch is at the end of October where you have Tennessee and a road trip to South Carolina. I think that's probably your toughest back-to-back. But, I mean, it's the SEC. We know the SEC is going to be really tough. And it's a very challenging schedule, but also one where you can pick up a lot of a couple quality non-conference wins on top of playing an SEC schedule that should help you theoretically in the eyes of the committee as far as strength of schedule goes. But definitely challenging and an interesting opening few games.
All right, basketball. We got Oklahoma, nice win. The SEC starts a brutal schedule to get after it. The SEC, I mean, you look at the rankings. I mean, even the teams not ranked are like 11-2. You know what I mean? It was unbelievable who they did. So, Charlie, your thoughts quickly on the Oklahoma game. Bama fans have been clamoring from a start to finish game, and that felt like the closest thing to it.
Yeah, I mean, the first 20 minutes has to have you really encouraged because it's one of the best 20 minutes that they played, at least from a defensive standpoint, especially on Fears. Oklahoma's a really good true freshman. Got a little more lax in the second half. That's human nature. Nate Oats said as much. But I think to come out and to establish a strong start to what's going to be a tough SEC slate was important. I don't necessarily know if it was a statement, but Alabama felt in control for most of the game, if not all of it. I think you're continuing to get some rust knocked off some guys. I think Chris Youngblood is only going to get better for this team. We didn't see much of Houston Millett. We know he was coming off of an illness, and you can feel like some garbage coming off that. So that's not that surprising. He didn't play a ton of minutes. But, yeah, I think having that game before this tough kind of 4-game stretch coming up is really key because you've got – was it 3 of the next 4 on the road? 3 of the next 4 are ranked opponents. So to go in and beat a really good Oklahoma team who I think, was it you, Blake? You said that was their first true road game of the season.
Yeah.
That's an absurd thing to say out loud.
It's crazy.
But kudos to them for being able to schedule that. But I think
isn't that like Alabama's third home? How many home games has Alabama even had? 3, 4?
I think that was their 7th.
I think it was 6.
Is it that many?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Nate Oats took the show on the road. He was like, Barnum and Bailey out there for a while, it felt like. But I think that that game is big for momentum, and you got to have a strong start in this league, and you got to keep it going because there's not a day off. Because like the South Carolina game, Alabama should win, but you can't sleep on that because then you have games against A&M and Ole Miss and Kentucky coming up. You can't overlook the Gamecocks at all because you can go and lay an egg on the road. And now you're 1-1 going into a tough stretch. So go 3-1. Maybe 4-0 in this, and it's smooth, not smooth sailing, but it's a good, strong start to SEC play, and you're going to be right there in contention.
So, Blake, with this schedule, is it a game-by-game situation with this team? I still think Alabama's going to have those moments where they rise. When they see you're ranked, when they see they're on the road, when they feel like they're the villain, I think that's when they're going to play their best. But game-by-game, stretch-by-stretch, what are your thoughts here?
I mean, you've got to take it game by game in this league because if you try to look ahead, like you're going to get caught up. This league is way too good to, like Charlie said, overlook South Carolina, looking ahead to a road game, a top 10 matchup on Saturday against Texas A&M, and then South Carolina beat you. Like this is a South Carolina team that beat Clemson a couple weeks ago, and Clemson's probably a top 4 team in the ACC. And South Carolina's probably viewed as the second worst or worst team in the league. So you've got an unbelievably stacked league. And it's just every night it's something else. You've got South Carolina on the road, then you've got number 10 Texas A&M on the road. You come home, you think you're getting a break, but you get a ranked Ole Miss team, and then you got to go to Rupp and play Kentucky, and that's just your first 4 games or so. And then you factor in the fact that the first half of Alabama's SEC schedule is pretty much easier compared to the back half. When in Alabama's last 5 games, they're playing Auburn, Tennessee, Florida, Mississippi State, Kentucky, all back to back. So like all of these games, you have to take it one at a time, because if you end up looking ahead or you try to say, oh, we got to go get this record in this stretch and this record in this stretch, that's just going to come back to bite you. I think you got to take it one game at a time and beat the next opponent in front of you. And in this league, that's going to be extremely challenging with the number of good teams there are, even though we're going to get to the middle of February and there's going to be a team that has underperformed expectations, maybe like an Arkansas or a Texas that's gone maybe below 500 in SEC play to that point, and Alabama's got to go play on the road over there. And that's going to be an extremely challenging game against a tough team. That's just how good the SEC is this year.
I mean, you look at tonight's schedule, you got Tennessee's number 1 in the country, is a 3.5-point dog at Florida. You got Kentucky's number 6 in the country. They're a 2.5-point favorite at Georgia. Georgia's 12-2, by the way. Auburn goes to Texas. Auburn looks like maybe the top team in the country right now. Big favorite over Texas. But you got Mississippi State's ranked, going to Vanderbilt 13-1, LSU and Missouri. So you're right. I mean, there's not going to be any rest for the wicked. Well, guys, we appreciate it. If y'all are looking for Charlie Potter or Blake Byler, you can catch them at BamaOnLine. Do a ton of great comment. Jump in. We have thoughts. We have threads. We have arguments. We have everything you'd expect on the round table. And, boys, I know it's a little late, but this will be my last one of the year. But Happy New Year to both of you guys.
Appreciate it, Tim.
Happy New Year.
Good to catch up.
See you guys. Hello, Andrew Bone. Whoa, easy. I know you're excited to see me. Relax. Andrew Bone is joining us with his nice-looking hoodie. It's the best I've seen him dressed this year. It's the first time I've seen him, for the record. Andrew Bone, how are you doing? We survived the portal. We got a huge break because we didn't get a commitment after the portal ended till Monday, and they didn't go on the road till Tuesday. So actually, there's been no break whatsoever. We didn't have a commitment on Christmas, so I mean things are trending up there, right?
Yeah, that's right. Who was that? Zane Gibson? Man,
Christmas Eve.
The Christmas Eve commitment.
He changed it for us.
Things are going good. Happy New Year! Happy New Year to our fans on the BOL channel. Yeah, I mean portals. I guess it's weird because it's over, but we're still kind of watching to see what happens with some other teams. I mean, because not Georgia. Who are the teams playing this weekend?
Well, Georgia's window's open. Ole Miss's window's open. Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas.
So you never know.
Ohio State.
Schools, yeah. So
there's some talent that's going to probably jump in that portal at some point. So,
but as far as Alabama, guys that are on Alabama's team, think we got our, at least got the team that, there right now that's going to be there in the spring.
Yeah. I mean, I think the expectations are so built up for the portal because you want to go get, I tell like Bama fans are like, Ohio State went and got Caleb Downs, those kind of guys. I said, yeah, but Nick Saban had to retire. Caleb Downs had to have a coaching change. A lot of the biggest names you hear are going to be coaching name related, right? Jeremy Bernard left because of a coaching change. A lot of that stuff, Parker Brailsford that we've seen happen. So it's a little less. Also, teams have done a better job of protecting and keeping guys from leaving that they don't want to leave, Andrew.
Yes, we had talked about this the day on the board, and then I saw another guy talked about it. Alabama, from what they like to do from an NIL perspective, I think they like to reinvest in their star players. You come to Alabama, you're going to have you have a great career, not necessarily a career, great season, great couple seasons. You don't want to, they don't want to lose those guys. They're going to, whether it's to the NFL or some other schools out there trying to poach them from the portal, trying to entice them to get into the portal. If you have success at Alabama, Alabama's going to, they're going to reward you. I don't think it's necessarily we're going to go all in and make these big offers to these high school kids. We're going to go out there. We're going to get players who want to come here. They can play. If they shine, they're going to get they're going to get well taken care of over the course of the next couple of years.
Yeah, and also there's teams that are desperate. There's teams that need a position. Justin linebacker goes in the portal. There's people that really like his upside. He's an athletic guy. It does stink to lose guys like that because if you've been watching football long enough, you're used to stockpiling those guys and those guys coming in 2 years later. But Alabama has 3. We talked about this earlier. Alabama has 3 senior inside backers, 3 freshmen they liked that they signed. So, my best advice for anybody is not to worry about 2026. To worry about 2025 because that's the season that's coming upon you. 2026, you might go get 5 inside linebackers out of the portal. You never know exactly what's happening. But, Andrew, let's talk about Kalen DeBoer. Hitting the road, assistants with him on the road. We threw up a little story earlier. He's not wasting any time now. Just to be clear, the window opened yesterday to visit, but all the schools were closed. They open back today. So Kalen DeBoer is on the road. He's going to take some assistance with him and see some of the top talent Alabama's chasing.
Yeah, and he's starting out in the state of Alabama. And there's all these storylines about recruiting in the state of Alabama and how Alabama got blown out in the state, even though they signed, an elite class. There weren't a lot of guys that they heavily targeted in 2025. So 2026, what's it going to look like? They're certainly going to target, the main guys, the top guys in the state, guys that they feel like can best help their program. They're not looking at, we've got to sign 10 plus in-state guys. They want to go after their top 10 guys at each position group. And, they're going to be evaluating a lot of different kids. We're going to see some new offers that are going to get extended over the course of the next few months, going into spring. And right now it's all about, building those relationships, going out, seeing the top end guys in the state, guys that you've already been recruiting for a while, guys that you've been recruiting since last spring, like Zion Gibson, who committed on Christmas Eve. They're going to go see him today. You made a post on BOL the other night about some of the other guys that Alabama is going to go out there and see today. And it's really the top guys that they've been recruiting, for the last several months. But it's also about going out and trying to find some new guys that they haven't seen yet.
The thing, and I'm still trying to get a certain part of the fan base we are to understand how different it is. I even had somebody say Saban did it this way in the portal and DeBoer does it a different way and I don't like it. Well, they're not apples to apples. Shit, they're apples to pineapples. I mean, Kalen DeBoer's coming in. I mean, this crazy because we're still saying this. He hasn't even been here a year. But the one thing that's a positive is that on January 7th, he's going to see kids that he had the past 11 months to build a relationship with. Last year, when he hit the state and started seeing all the in-state kids, he literally was just meeting them for the first time. And that was in February. When was that? February? 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was late. It was kind of, it was like the third third or fourth week of January was when.
Yeah, we can't even keep up with it. So he was meeting them for the first time. Now, when he goes to see Anthony Tank Jones, who he's going to see some point today, St. Paul, 5-star talent, Wolf linebacker, edge, whatever you want to call him, he's had a year to work that
And
relationship.
he
So,
went in, and that was one of the first guys that he went and saw last year around this time
yeah.
too. So that's a year-long relationship, and that's important.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I know a lot of people say relationships don't matter. You and I definitely disagree because it's all NIL. But you know what? The NIL is always going to factor in with every recruit, but that relationship can get a little bit less. If they love you and they want to be there, they might take a little bit less. We saw that this year with the Alabama class. Andrew, where is Kalen DeBoer going this morning?
Well, he's going to be in my old stomping grounds, Gadsden. He's going to go see.
Welcome to Gadsden, home of Andrew Bone, is the sign I
Yeah,
always see when I go through.
that's right. That's right. I was there the other day. That sign looks great. I think
I just repainted it for you.
I appreciate it. He's he's going to be busy today. He's not only going to be in Northeast Alabama, he's going to be, kind of in different parts throughout the state. He's going to be down in the Mobile area. So going back down, seeing Tank, seeing a few other guys down in South Alabama. So it's going to be a big, busy day inside the state for Coach DeBoer. But he's going to have some other guys with him. We know Courtney Morgan's going to be out there. We know, Zion told me that Mo Lindquist was going to be up there today. So we can expect maybe some other position coaches down in South Alabama with them later on this
Yeah,
afternoon.
I think Christian Robinson will definitely be there. They're going to see Chicken Gabor, the 2027 DA tomorrow. I tell you, Andrew, and again, we've got this story up at BamaOnLine.com and a great discussion about what's going to take place this week. But Gunner Rivers, they're going to swing by St. Paul Fairhope, which makes sense. They're going to be in South Alabama. But Gunner Rivers, we know his daddy, right?
Yeah, the crazy part about his dad is I know what. I don't think you were covering recruiting back when his dad went through the recruiting process. That'd have been what, 2020? I think that's 2000.
You're saying basically you're saying even you're not that old. That's what you're.
Yeah, because I can remember he played obviously Phillip Rivers played at Athens High School. Was heavily recruited by a lot of schools. I think he grew up an Alabama fan, but Alabama. His coaching staff had already really started to focus on a junior quarterback in the state of Alabama, and that was Brody Kroll. So know that pretty well, know that whole recruiting story pretty well, and I think Phillip Rivers was actually started to get recruited more so at a different position than quarterback.
Safety. They loved him at safety. It's crazy.
We're all in on Brody Kroll, and Brody almost went to Florida State. He had privately committed to Mark Richt, who was the offensive coordinator at Florida State at the time. So they almost lost out on both of those guys. But fortunately, Brody got him through some. I guess while he was healthy, got him through a couple tough years. But man, his son, Gunner Rivers, intriguing prospect, had a great sophomore year. A couple good sophomore quarterbacks in the state of Alabama, but all still in that evaluation stage. I don't think Alabama's really made a decision yet on who they're really going to target, push for as far as 2027 quarterbacks. They're out on the road starting to develop those relationships.
Yeah, Gunner, you name your son Gunner. You're a former NFL quarterback who was really good. Name your son Gunner. I was watching his film last night. Boy, he gets it out of there really quick. I'd like to see him live. They got this overhead view, but definitely a guy that's someone to watch. So, he's out of the gates today, seeing Zion Gibson, who's a big in-state recruit. That guy had a ton of offers going down to Mobile, and he'll see more schools in Mobile. Mobile's got, 16, 18 schools. You can go hit them all. He'll be going school to school and dragging.
Did you see who was at Gadsden City on Monday?
No. Josh
Heupel.
Was he?
So Tennessee's not giving up yet on Zion Gibson. They were the first school to they had, I think, 2 or 3 coaches alongside Josh Heupel at Gadsden City yesterday, just because Zion was a big target for them. Zion had Tennessee in his top 3, probably top 2 when he made that decision for Alabama. So they're not going to give up. But Zion's he's a Bama kid, so they're going to make sure he feels loved.
And for those that haven't followed as closely, Zion Gibson, Andrew and I were covering it, and we thought he was committing several times during the year. I mean, it was, hey, he's getting close. Iron Bowl, we thought for sure he was committing at the Iron Bowl, and he delayed it. And then he bounced around with some dates. He wanted to commit on Christmas, and then he wanted to commit on his birthday at one point, which is February 3rd or something maybe. And then he settled on. Is that when he was doing it?
I don't know when his birthday is, but that's my birthday.
Oh man, gosh.
Well, I think it was the 13th. I think he was trying to do something on the 13th.
Thank goodness. Ooh, if they're born on your birthday, it raises the bus factor. I'm just saying. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, Zion is going to be a big time guy, going to get a lot of attention. Heading down to Mobile, which is always fruitful. We're going to add Jimmy Stein in the show a few minutes. You know, Mobile's loaded. Jimmy loves Mobile. Mobile's always going to have its talent. It's fair share of talent, so good place to hit. But also tomorrow, we're expecting them at Hoover, Thompson, all those kind of schools, you know, checking in. Speaking of 2027, Trent Seahorn is there at Thompson 2027. We've been watching him. We've been watching. Well, I was going to say, he's a guy. What's interesting with Trent is that Trent actually can move up to the 2026 class if he wanted to. So he's got some options there. And we've been watching him since he won a state championship as an 8th grader. Very visible. I'm waiting for you to fill in on Trent.
I mean, you were just talking.
Did I drop the mic and the show's over?
No, not yet. Trent Seaborn. Definitely a guy that we've known about, as you mentioned, since his 8th grade years. Won a couple state championships. Led Thompson to another state championship this year, and certainly a kid that has a lot of attention on him. Still in that evaluation stage for some schools, and like I said, there's some really good quarterbacks in the 27 class, especially in the state of Alabama. So I think with Alabama, they want to be right as far as who they extend an offer to. At least in the state, because when you extend an offer in state for Alabama and this new staff, Coach DeBoer, even though he's going into his 2nd year, I think, when they extend those offers in state, they want those kids to be able to commit on those offers rather than, hey, we're going to give you an offer, but we still need to evaluate you a little bit
see
more.
in camp.
Yeah, so I think that's fine for out-of-state kids, but for in-state kids and what we've seen from Alabama, at least to this point, they don't offer an in-state kid unless they're ready to take that commitment.
And again, you guys following recruiting, do us a favor, hit that like and subscribe button. Channel's been doing great. It's growing. We enjoy the people that come in, discuss this, watch this. We do some live shows. There's some action. But Andrew, before we bring Jimmy Stein in, let's talk a little bit about Jared Curtis, since we're sitting on the quarterbacks right now.
Yeah, I think quarterback recruiting in 2026 is going to be really intriguing because you have Ty Simpson, you have Austin Mack, Keelan Russell. How difficult is it going to be to sign an elite 5-star, top 5 quarterback in the 2026 class after you just signed Keelan Russell? Alabama's going to need some depth. I mean, Alabama's going to need quarterbacks, and I think Jared Curtis. This is a guy that they really like, that they developed an early relationship with. He was offered last January by Coach DeBoer. So, and he committed to Georgia back in the spring. So he's been committed to Georgia. He was committed to Georgia until the fall. Decommitted. Now he's kind of wide open, but there's a lot of schools that are all in on him. Oregon's one of them. North Carolina's recruiting him. South Carolina's recruiting him. You're going to have a lot of different programs that are going to be all over, Jared. But he's very interested in Alabama. He was in Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl. Scheduled to be back at Alabama on February the 1st. For another visit. So even though it might be difficult to sign, back-to-back 5-star quarterbacks, Jared Curtis is at least showing a lot of interest. And I think Alabama's going to, at least for now, kind of wait and see what happens there.
I mean, because you've got 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks, 7 of the top 10 quarterbacks committed already. Jared's the one who's not committed. He had committed, decommitted. You got Ryder Lyons, who's going on a mission. And the one I'm really interested about is Landon Duckworth from Jackson, Alabama. He's kind of a guy I'm curious to see. Alabama staff will be in to see him this week, tomorrow, or what is today? Tomorrow or Thursday. They will be at Jackson High School. He's an interesting guy because, again, an in-state guy, athletic, drawing a lot of eyes on him.
Yeah, and obviously Jackson, one of the top high school programs in the state, won a state championship. They've got a pretty big time running back in the 27 class is Xavier Kroll, EJ Kroll. So yeah, I mean Alabama's going to spend a lot of time there, and they'll at least evaluate them. And hey, this might be one of those situations this year where Alabama decides to take 2 quarterbacks. I'm not saying they will, but they're definitely going to sign one, and they might sign 2. So he's a guy that they're going to quickly, they're going to carefully evaluate and potentially go after it down the road.
All right, let's bring in Jimmy Stein. Jimmy, welcome to the show. It's good to see you. Happy New Year. It's the last time I'm saying it ever this year. We're already at the 7th, but welcome to the show. We survived the portal. We survived the season. We've almost survived the 2025 recruiting class. And we're here. The Bama staff is on the road already. But let's talk about the roster. I want both of your opinions. You look at this Alabama roster. What jumps out to you? Say the season's starting in a week.
Yeah, I'm even gonna write something about it today. There's a very veteran nature to the projected starting lineup that we haven't seen. I counted up the other day. There's something like 15 true seniors on this team next fall. And while that might not sound like a lot to people that have been following college football for a long time, it's a lot now. Alabama's had much fewer than 15. And I'm talking about guys that are definitely in their last year of eligibility. Alabama's had guys they've called seniors, like Jamarian Latham a year ago, who actually had a year to come back. But next year, there's 15 guys in their final year. Most of them will be in the starting lineup. That's what jumps out to me, guys, is this is going to be an older, mature, veteran group, at least the guys that we see on the field.
Yeah, Andrew, and again, we need to touch again on that. I did it with Charlie earlier, but the fact that they got Tim Keenan back, LT Overton, Parker Brailsford, we're waiting on Jeremy to see what he's going to do. We expect he's going to do sometime this week. We're leaning towards he's coming back. Latham still out there with the possible other year. But, I mean, this has probably went better than we expected because right now, is it 3 underclassmen that would have declared if you get Jeremy back? You'd have Booker, Campbell, and Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, and you look at Alabama's scholarship number, and they got 80 players. People keep out. Why haven't we added more? We needed to add 15 more guys from the portal. There's not room. You've got 5 spots currently available, which you and I have talked about it, Tim. Potentially give one of those spots to a walk-on who's been there for a couple of years. Potentially should earn it. There's options that are available, and I think Alabama's going to go into the spring knowing that, hey, we're going to wait and see who else is potentially available. And you might have some availability from some of these schools that are still playing in the college football playoffs. So kind of keep your options open. But I think when I see different people mad about, they should have gone after more defensive linemen. There's 12 defensive linemen returning to Alabama next season, and you've got pretty much your starters across the board, plus you have the incoming guys. People are mad that Alabama didn't go after another edge rusher because they're losing some Quay Rousseau, or not, Q Robinson. Well, they went after and got Kevontae Henry out of junior college. That's who they went and got. They didn't go after a portal guy. They went after a JUCO guy who's played a year in college, been in JUCO for 2 years, now at Alabama. So you're kind of betting on Kevontae Henry to come in and make an impact. I think the one area of concern for me, though, is on special teams at the punter position, because you only have one scholarship punter coming into the spring. Got a little banged up, and Alex Asperov, that's your only scholarship punter as of right now. So I think that might be an area that Alabama looks at maybe in the spring portal window, or maybe even some of these guys that decide to enter the portal after bowl season officially ends.
And for you BamaOnLine subscribers, Andrew had a great story with the punter. He's a hard one to get. It doesn't sound like it, but the last time I've seen anyone J.K. Scott, me and Andrew were discussing this yesterday. J.K. Scott refused to talk. He just refused. He was he just didn't want to talk. I'm like, you're a damn punter. You should be calling me. Why am I even calling out to Colorado?
Yeah, it's usually your 5-star quarterbacks.
Yes.
Or wide receivers that, they're just not going to talk to anybody. But it was the 3-star punters that are the white rhinos in our industry.
Yes. You could get Keelan Russell a lot easier than a punter. I'm just saying, Jimmy. I can't make fun of the subscribers who aren't good at math because I'm terrible at it. But give us some of your thoughts on the 80. You've touched on Nick Saban's went in under 85 before. Let's give a little bit of a history lesson. This is nothing new. You know, I even had people messaging me and telling me that Bama they said Saban would never take a project offensive lineman from the portal. I said he did it last year. He did it literally last year. What happens to y'all? I think part of it is just you what's that movie with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones where you flash the thing and they forget everything?
Men in Black.
Men in Black. I think they just go blank when that season ends and we forget last year. But Jimmy, give us a history lesson on those numbers, please.
Yes, Nick Saban was under 85, not just several years. I would say most years. He probably ended up now under 85. I don't mean 72. I mean, 84, 83, sometimes 81. It's very difficult to hit exactly on the number, nor is there a contest that you must have 85. As a matter of fact, if you're highly dependent on your 81st, 82nd, 83rd player on the roster, you've got bigger problems than not being able to fill out the 85. Look, Alabama could fill out the 85 by this afternoon. By 4 o'clock, they could fill out the 85, but that's not a good idea. We always talk about BOL. All of us talk about it's the who, not the how many. It's how good they are. Can they help you? It doesn't mean that are they a 5-star starter that you expect to start for 3 years. There are different roles that kids need to fill in an organization, filling out practice squads, your scout team. You got to have enough guys to practice. Not every guy you sign has to be a projected multi-year starter first-round pick. No one else builds their team that way either. It literally is about team building. So the fact that Alabama's at 80 today means absolutely nothing as far as I'm concerned about how next year could go. Good or bad. It does give Alabama some room. And you guys touched on it earlier. I think one thing to look for, Bones said this, Alabama's got one kicker on scholarship for next year, one punter on scholarship for next year. It's not 1,000% guarantee that either will start. You don't have a long snapper on scholarship. There's probably going to be a competition of some sort, but you might need to save a couple of these spots for these special teams guys that win jobs. I mean, imagine if a redshirt freshman wins the long snapper job. Maybe that's a guy that you're like, wow, he's going to snap for us for 4 years. He might need a scholarship. And heck, and as we all know, it gets complicated, but a year from now, maybe everybody on the whole squad has to have a scholarship, and you better scholarship those special teams guys because they're going to become extremely valuable in a world where 105 players are on the team, but no walk-ons. You better have multiple kickers and punters on scholarship. So saving these spots for special teams guys makes some sense to me too.
Also, I don't think project is something or developmental guys is a negative. It's like a lot of people make it seem at times. I mean, we were on the board this morning talking, and they named one of the posters said name one Alabama offensive lineman who was a project that panned out. And I said Seth McLaughlin. And they said he wasn't a project. I said he's like 245 pounds. He wasn't ranked in the top 500. He wasn't ranked in the top 75 of offensive linemen. He's every bit the project. So I think history says, oh, no, we knew he was going to be good. But Andrew, you and I know when Seth McLaughlin committed, there was a lot of I don't get it's. There's been a lot of guys that did really well where they didn't get it.
It's always the guys – it's always the guys from Georgia that don't have Georgia offers that are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Seth, Chance, let's go back. Chance Warmack is a guy that was a 3-star from the state of Georgia. Why is, Nick Saban must not be able to recruit the state of Georgia because he's going into Georgia and taking a 3-star kid that ends up being one of the best guards in the Saban dynasty. Offensive linemen are tough. I mean, you got a lot of guys that are developmental guys. They're not every offensive lineman that you recruit isn't Michael Carroll or Jackson Lloyd. You've got to get these guys into a system for a couple of years, try to develop them. Now, I like the kid that they I say I like him. I think he's got potential. The guy that they were able to bring in from Ball State, you need those type of guys as far as, having a body in the room, not necessarily having to commit, an arm and a leg NIL wise. And hopefully this is a guy that can develop. He's 6'6", 330 pounds, has only played football for like a year and a half, and has NFL measurables. So a lot of kids are looking for chances to start immediately and looking to get paid. This is a guy that's looking to work for a year in a college system, in a great college system like Alabama, and kind of see where he goes. If it works out, great for Alabama, great for him. If it doesn't, you were able to have a guy in for a year, at a position where you really needed some bodies.
Jimmy, you had something to say. I saw you ready to go.
Just we're talking about offensive line.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say pretty much virtually, like Bone just pointed out, virtually every offensive lineman is a project, because very few high school offensive linemen show up ready to play SEC football. Very few. But I would say one guy who's even high profile, I would call a project that worked out, is DJ Fluker. I mean, I was at a combine where they had to scratch all of Fluker's times because they were so bad, and he was ranked as high as he was, and he was a great prospect, but it was always going to take some time with Fluke, and it did take some time. But man, when he got rolling, I would say after about a year and a half or maybe 2 years, which might not seem like a lot of time, but Fluker had to be built from the ground up by Alabama. So virtually, I would say most offensive linemen that even an Alabama would sign are guys, it's going to take a while, maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe 4. The only thing that matters is what's the payoff at the end.
Yeah, and another thing, I don't think people have, Andrew and I and you, we follow recruiting so closely. We're there for the no way we're taking the SMU commitment. We're there for that moment. And then later on, nobody's like, oh, yeah, I was one that overreacted because he went to – nobody overreacts. I was searching the other day to post a Will Anderson sack. So I went to Twitter and I searched Will Anderson. I found a tweet from October where I had a tweet saying – Will Anderson isn't getting as much respect as players in his class, talking about to Bama fans, but he's having a great senior year. Not only that, he didn't even get his 5th. I have a tweet in January saying he crushed it at – which game was he at, Andrew? Army? Army at the time? Under Armour game, saying he's in contention for his 5th star. So as late as January, he didn't have his 5th star. So when he committed – there was, why are we taking this kid? Georgia doesn't want him. Pretty upset, showed the film. There's a gradual build. So I think you probably want to educate yourself a little bit more on the Louisiana guy. I don't know a lot about him, but I don't see much harm in taking him. Andrew Bone, 2025 guys have arrived. They're on campus. They're in their dorms. We're pretty excited. I want you and Jimmy to give me a couple of guys you're looking forward to. We've seen some in practice, some you're excited about. Just ones you want to see in the spring.
You're talking about transfers or high school kids?
No, high school guys. Well, I guess they all enrolled. You're right.
Are the ones that are JUCO guys?
Yeah, no, 2025 Keelan Russell's class. I mean, the spring's exciting. Yes, I'm so excited for spring this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think one kid I'm really intrigued about is Dejon Lee. I mean, this is a unique player in the defensive backfield for Alabama. Almost 6'4", 190 pounds, was a two-way star for his high school team. Played both ways, and now he's coming to Tuscaloosa. Going to completely focus in on cornerback at Alabama, and that's a great secondary. The way those guys developed over the course of the last year under Coach Mo, I think that was one of the best units on the team. And it was a lot of inexperience, a lot of guys who never played together. So really looking forward to seeing that group back. But now you're adding some really good talent there, in a Dejon Lee, in an Ivan Taylor. Chuck McDonald's coming in during the summer, but really intrigued to see what this 6'4", 190-pound corner is going to be able to do at Alabama.
Jimmy?
Yeah, a couple of guys for me. One will be one of the transfers. I'm really high on Nakai Greenhill, the linebacker that's coming in from Colorado. I think he's an immediate, not just a contender to start. I think he's an immediate splash guy. I'm really blown away by some of his highlight tapes. And of course, again, he was selected to a couple of all Big 12 squads. I think he can provide some immediate help. And with Deontay Lawson rehabbing injury, there's going to be some opportunity in the spring for him to really make a splashy entrance. And high school wise, I'm curious about Michael Carroll in the sense that can Big Mike, can he come in and be an immediate factor? Alabama doesn't really need him to be. You've got Geno Vandermark, you've got Cam Dewberry, the transfer from A&M, but it would be nice if Michael Carroll has a Tyler Booker type, Evan Neal type entrance to the team where, hey, spring one, day one, this looks like a guy that might need to be in the lineup. So those are two guys I'm looking forward to this spring to see how splashy they are.
Tell you, my guy, I got two of them. I'm really wanting to see Ivan Taylor. We've heard nothing but great things. There's an opportunity at safety. They only signed a safety. This guy's, going to be a little bit different mentality and everything else. And another one is Abdul Sanders. He showed up. We saw him in some practices. We've talked about Luke all year. We've talked about Metz all year. We haven't really talked about Abdul Sanders. He's kind of just been a quiet guy, but man, he looks the part. I just want to see what he can do, and what he can't do. Andrew, I want y'all. How excited are y'all for the quarterback battle? This reminds me a lot of Bryce and Mac. We spent a whole year going, it's not a lock, Bryce takes over. You remember that? Bryce is done. They're not. But we kept noticing, I discussed this with both of y'all at different times, Mac had that locker room. When you looked at the Instagram photos, all the rideouts were with Mac, not Tua. So when the best players on the team were with Mac, we knew he was in there. But now we got Keelan, we got Ty Simpson, we got Austin Mack we haven't seen a lot of. What's your excitement for that quarterback position?
Yeah, a lot like you just said, Tim. It reminds me a lot of Bryce because I think Keelan Russell can be that type of player. I don't like the comp, but I think he can be like Bryce, like Tua. I mean, I think that's the level of talent that he's showing up with. But Ty Simpson, again, I don't like this comp, but it does remind me of Mac Jones partly because Mac was a redshirt junior when he took over, just like Ty. Ty's been here. Yeah. There's some comfort. There's more skill than people realize. He wasn't a 5-star because his name was picked out of a hat. He's a 5-star because of some obvious traits. He has 5-star traits. Now he's got maturity to go along with it. I think he's going to be really tough to beat out. And I'll remind anybody that, hey, day one, spring practice, snap one, Ty Simpson's the first-team quarterback. I think everybody agrees with that. So to some extent or another, Ty's going to have to be removed from that spot. So Keelan's going to have to really bring it quickly to do that. So it does remind me a little bit of Bryce and Mac, and we'll see. But my money is on Ty early on.
Andrew, have you got a position you're keeping the closest? Or do you want to talk about the quarterbacks?
I was just going to say one thing about Ty.
Sure, go ahead.
I'll never forget Ty telling me back in high school that it never was going to matter to him what year he finally had a chance to start at Alabama, that he was always going to stay at Alabama until the end. That's where he always wanted to be. He got recruited by a completely different staff, obviously, but the fact that he's stuck around, he stayed with the team. He wanted an opportunity to win that starting position back in the spring. He didn't. Jalen Milroe got it, and he decided to stick around, for another year. And I think this is now his turn. But there's obviously with Austin Mack, a guy that's been around Coach DeBoer's system for 2 years now. He's going to push. I think Keelan Russell coming in, there's obviously a lot of hype, but there's also a lot of getting used to and learning the system. And, he's going to get some looks during the spring, but I think this is a Ty Simpson, Austin Mack battle heading into the fall, and I think it's probably going to be Ty's job. But as far as position group, I think that right tackle position is going to be probably one of the most interesting battles, especially heading into the spring. Now, if you look at the roster, you see four scholarship offensive tackles heading into the spring. That doesn't necessarily mean there's only 4 guys that are going to be competing at that right tackle position. There's going to be some other guys that are out there. With Elijah Pritchett deciding to leave, you're going to have some guys that have been working at guard. Casey Poe, Joe Ionata, Micah DeBose who's coming in, Jackson Lloyd who's coming in, maybe even Michael Carroll that are all going to get probably looks at that right tackle spot, along with Wilkin Formby. Now, can Formby take that next step, continue to develop, be a veteran at that position for Alabama next season and have a great year? That's very possible, but there's also going to be some competition, some more guys that are going to be competing there that are young, that are inexperienced, but can make that room a little bit, or can make that right side a little bit better.
Yeah, I think people forget Formby was a redshirt freshman. There's such a impatient world. You want depth and you want them to develop, and then when they play and they're not perfect, you want to be upset about it. But we were told that Bama was going to lose either Pritchett or Formby. I think they made the right decision at the end of the day on having to do that. Pritchett's going to get paid. He'll have a nice job, a guaranteed starting spot. Because Jimmy, I don't feel like you could guarantee anybody that right tackle starting spot based off last year.
Yeah, Dick. It really was a back and forth deal. And we have to remember last summer and last fall, Formby was ahead of Pritchett. It took the South Florida game for Formby to lose that right tackle spot. And hey, let's be honest, that was bad. He did not perform well against South Florida, lost the spot to Pritchett, who came in and did some good things. But then as the season progressed, Pritchett wasn't always great. They took a look at Formby. Formby was getting really 50% of the snaps over the past 2 or 3 games. And I think since Formby was removed from the South Florida game, there's been some steady improvement there. If I had to bet on one long-term, to be honest, not sour grapes, but if I had to bet on one long-term, I would bet on Formby based on his age and based on what I saw post-South Florida, though I do believe Elijah Pritchett is definitely a talent that deserves to be starting somewhere.
Well, the problem with Pritchett, I think, for a lot of people is when you look at him, you're expecting him to be, an unbelievable, perfect offensive lineman. I mean, that's what you draw up. That's what you draw him up physically. So I think that hurt him.
I think one thing that I think people don't realize is he wanted a shot to play left tackle. Pritchett did.
Yeah.
He's a right tackle, but he wants to play left tackle. He wasn't going to play left tackle anymore at Alabama, especially with Caden Proctor returning. He wanted that opportunity to play left tackle somewhere, and somebody's going to give it to him. It just wasn't going to be at Alabama.
Honestly thought he might have been better to move inside and seek out one of those guard positions. I think maybe he would be a little bit better there, road grader and guys that we've seen. I'll tell you, position I'm pretty excited to see is the running back. I mean, we haven't really, not a great year running the ball. I still think a lot of that starts up front. We got to get everything fixed there. But I want to see these guys, Richard Young, Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, the Louisiana kid, A.K. Deer. I want to see every one of these guys tote the mail, have a chance, because that's the one thing, we was talking about earlier in the show. You add the Louisiana running back, Draylon Washington. He's got experience. How many more backs on this team have any experience, any real experience?
Yeah, virtually none of them. And
just jam. Yeah.
Just jam. And the scant carries we saw Richard Young this past year. But one point about those running backs is Jalen Milroe had so many carries, so much of the running responsibility was on Milroe. That's probably gone in terms of next fall. So all those Milroe carries are now going to be distributed to the backs. And they ain't all going to Jam, or they ain't all going to Richard Young. So I think bringing in an extra experienced back is good, because you're going to be dependent on more backs next fall because you have to distribute those Milroe carries somewhere.
And for people, and people will act like, oh, they're bringing in a running back. That means that Richard Young or some of these young guys aren't going to get the opportunities. If Richard Young or A.K. Deer or Kevin Riley or Daniel Hill, if they're better than Draylon Washington, they're going to play more. They're not just going to be committed.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
I mean, I just don't understand it. Oh, why bring in? Because you're bringing in more competition.
I hope he's better. I hope Washington.
Experience.
I hope Washington's better than Jam, personally. I hope everybody you bring in ups the ante in the room. And we heard this with Latham. There was whole debates on the round table. We want Latham to leave, and I'd say, why? He's experienced. They said, because he's taking a spot. I said, it's not quarterbacks. It's defensive linemen. We rotate them babies in, It's not like you're taking You know, you don't rotate your punters, you don't rotate your quarterbacks, you don't rotate your long snappers, but you rotate your defensive linemen and your DBs. We saw that a lot this year. So I didn't understand. Latham's a big college-ready body at worst. He's also got a lot of snaps and experience, and he moved a position. The one thing about Latham, me personally, I'd like to see him drop some weight. I think it would help him at Wolf because he's kind of a hybrid between Wolf and that defensive lineman, Jimmy.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy because he's a guy that played some Wolf primarily at Bandit. Under Saban, he played mostly inside, even though he was a little undersized for that. But hey, if you're going to have a 24-year-old on the team, defensive line is one of the first spots I would want him at. I think Latham's age, maturity, experience, that in and of itself is enough to add to the room, regardless of how many snaps he plays. Just because he's likely not the number one Bandit or the number one Wolf doesn't mean he's not valuable and helpful. And again, adding just a guy of his experience and maturity and leadership, that's just win-win.
Yeah. You know, the one thing also you got to factor it is you don't have to get a major injury to be on the bench for a while. We saw Devonta Smith in the tent. You know what I mean? He was in the tent all the time. You know, he's like Andrew Bone in Utah in a tent, you know, getting to know himself with some peyote, you know. Andrew wants to do that now. He's going to Google it. But, I mean, he was in there. Hey, look, have you guys noticed they're not wearing pads on their legs anymore? They're literally wearing thigh-high biking shorts with one pad at the top of their thigh. I saw a guy in the NFL get hit. He wasn't injured, but he was hurt because that helmet hit him right on that fat muscle on his thigh. He got frogged.
They barely wear shoulder pads anymore.
It's crazy. I see some of them out there like they're so high cut. Have y'all ever seen that show Reno 911? They got the cop that has the pants. The one guy that wears those short shorts, that's what some of them remind me. Anyways, we're about to get out of here. Andrew Bone, we have survived up to this point. We've got to this point, feel like we're in better shape, kind of know what our team is. Give us a 30-second quick final thought. Tell the fans what they need to be looking for. Help them out.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fun portal season for us. It's not as bad as a lot of people think it is. Alabama was able to hold on to most of their group. I posted this on BOL yesterday. Of the first-year players at Alabama this last year, the guys who started with Coach DeBoer, finished the season with Coach DeBoer, it was their full first season at Alabama. 80% of those guys returning to Alabama next season. You lose some guys, which were kind of expected, but you get your core guys back. There's a lot of belief in this staff, a lot of belief in this program. Excited about what's in store for the future. But yeah, I mean, right now coaches are out on the road evaluating high school players. We're gonna have a junior day coming up early February, and then it's spring evaluation season, spring training, spring practice. I mean, I'll be here before we know it. So stay tuned to BOL because we got it all covered.
Jimmy Stein, whose hair is looking fantastic today.
Oh, thank you. Well, a lot of it's getting cut, not just getting a haircut, getting all of them cut. Wednesday.
God cuts mine in the shower every day, just a little bit.
I'm excited about reading Joe Hastings and Andrew Bone and Tim Watt's comments on recruiting the next few days because DeBoer being on the road in Alabama, I'm not only a huge fan of Alabama football recruiting, but I'm always intrigued by the in-state guys, particularly down in my neck of the woods that DeBoer is going to be down here in the Mobile area for today and tomorrow. Mobile is loaded with a lot of interesting prospects in both the 26 and the 27 class. Seeing Gunnar Rivers today, Philip Rivers' son. Tim talked about it earlier in the show. Just real excited to see how Alabama improves in that area. They've recruited really well, nationally elite classes. It would be fun to see them add some big-time in-state kids.
Yeah, I agree. I think overall the portal's what we expected. We said they wanted to flip the roster, some, just writing on the wall, some hard discussions. But I think you have to keep your expectations kind of normal. I think the portal's disappointing for a lot of people because of Peter Woods. You know what I mean? Good Lord, Peter Woods hits a tweet thanking his fans and everybody stuck him in the portal. And I'd also like to point out the overreactions like Ty Simpson, he gone. Keon Keeley, he gone. Eventually you say, I mean, they've literally been in the portal how many years now?
every year. Well, since
You know what I
NPL
mean? Like,
not starting.
yes, I mean every year now, and hoping they both do great next year is certainly a time for them to shine. But I think overall, year one, we're 1 year almost into the post Saban era, and I know there's been some bumps, but it's a plus for me from what I expected. And I didn't even know the damn portal NIL was going to be here, and we were discussing it. I'd have had some apocalyptic thoughts if I'd have known all of that, you know. So, anyways, we appreciate you guys and gals turning in. We love doing the show. It's been a couple of weeks. We'll get back on the regular. Andrew Bone, say goodbye to your favorite people.
Goodbye, favorite
Jimmy
people.
Stein. Jimmy Stein.
See y'all on the board.
See you on the round table. Thank y'all for watching.